I'm going to there we go.
Did you need to start? Oh, okay, it is being recorded.
Yeah, I recorded it.
All right. Then can you let me know when everybody's joined? I'm not sure how many people are supposed to be on this.
Looks like we're waiting on Annette.
I'm here, Liz. My computer is connected.
Okay, I guess everybody's on then.
Oh, yes, I think we are all.
When they're going to be on?
Linda's here also. We have the same office today.
Okay.
And now can everybody see my screen? You should see a grayscale Yardi Voyager with Roosevelt Gardens.
Yes.
Okay. And should I increase the size of the font, or is that good for everybody?
A little bit. You can increase it a little bit.
Go ahead and give everybody another minute here. We'll start right on time. All right, so let's go ahead and get started here. We're going to start right on time. And up on the screen, you should see an agenda for today's meeting. We're going to be covering HUD Project Base Section 8 certifications. So we're going to start out with the move-in process, and then we're going to get into recertification notices, and then the annual recertification process. So recertification notices in that case are for our residents that have an annual recertification coming up in the next 120 days. So Voyagers has some out-of-the-box letters that we can send them at 120 days, 90 days, and 60 days from their annual recertifications. We'll also go over interim certifications, right? Somebody has a change in their household or income or assets. We'll need to create an interim recertification for our residents. And then also we're going to cover certification corrections. So these happen a lot of times on move-in certifications, where through an EIV finding, maybe a couple months later, we find out that possibly the Social Security number is wrong, or we missed the middle initial that they need to go by. So we need to create those corrections and then resubmit those through tracks. We'll also go over terminations from the 50059 subsidy program. Also, maybe a couple months later, they lose that source of income and now they requalify for 50059. We'll go over transfers in Voyager and how those work on the affordable housing side. And then lastly, we'll cover gross rent changes. These last two are kind of important to us because they're very time sensitive, and we want to make sure that all of our certifications are being updated properly with the new information. So on the transfers, remember, we want to make sure that our apartments coincide with our certifications correctly. And then for our gross rent changes, we want to make sure that any new certifications that are effective in the future from that gross rent change have the correct contract rents and utility allowances. So that's something that we want to review when doing those functions, okay? So I'm going to get into Voyager, and I am on Roosevelt Gardens. And before we get started with the move-in process, does anybody have any questions about the agenda? Okay, so if you do have any questions, feel free to just go ahead and unmute your phone and let me know that you have a question. So don't be shy. And then also we'll have some time at the end for some questions and answers as well. If you have something that you think is going to be maybe take a little bit longer, your question is going to take a little bit longer to answer. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and get started here. For the move-in process, I have a move-in. I have an applicant ready for us, and her name is Melissa Glover. And if we use our person search in the name field, we can search for Melissa. And then Melissa Glover comes up. Oh, my page has expired. Let's go ahead and try that one more time. Person search, Melissa Glover. And I see that there's two Melissa Glovers, but I want to take a look at Melissa Glover with the status applied because I know that she is my applicant. And when we're going through the application process, one of the items that we are taking a look at here is on the leasing steps is the select unit step. If we click on this compliance button, that's where we get taken out to the affordable side module. And we actually go through the qualification step here where we input family member information, income, assets, any expenses, household information, if we're verification letters, and then the validation where Voyager calculates our residence TTP or total tenant payment. Then the next step is where we can select our apartment that we would like to choose. Okay. So I just quickly wanted to go over that. Also, when we select our apartment, you'll see that apartment show up at the very top here on the prospect card in the unit field. That lets us know which apartment they're applying to. For rentable options, if there's any rentable options such as garages or storage units, parking, we can select those. For 50059 concessions, there's probably not any concessions for 50059 properties, so there's not going to be any there. On the application form, we can also collect more information that carries over to our resident screen. The big ones here are the emergency contact and any vehicle information. So if we're adding items here for any emergency contact information, that will get pulled over to our resident screen as well. So let me just quickly add in an emergency contact, relationship, phone number, and then an address. Okay. And then this, I will show you where this gets carried over to the resident screen. Okay. I'm going to click next. I'm going to go to application charges. For most 50059 properties, there's not going to be any application charges. That's a rare case where that's allowed. But again, in most cases, there's not going to be any application charges, so we can click next. And when we get to our application status, we get to the point where we can now approve, deny, or cancel our application. So again, if possibly they didn't pass their background check, we can deny their application, or they're over income, again, we can deny their application. Also, if they find other housing and they're no longer interested in our property, we can always cancel the application at any time. From here, we can take a look at their ledger or assign another unit. Also, there's an adjust move-in date. Sometimes that move-in date is a floating date. Sometimes that changes, so we can also adjust that as well. So let's go ahead, and I'm going to hit the approve button to approve this application. And since this property is using our 50059 waiting list style, we're going to get an approve application screen for our waiting list. What this is going to do is require us to input a comment for our waiting list contact log before we approve our application. So let's put in a date and time that they got their application approved. And let's say that it's today. And let's say that it was at 9 a.m. this morning. And let's just go with Lisa was the agent that approved the application. If there's any additional comments that you would like to make for the waiting list contact log, you can make them here on this field. It is not a blue field. It is not a required field, so there's nothing additional that needs to be added in unless you would like. Also down below, there's a table with the warning saying that we're going to be skipping some prospects. In our case, due to reasonable accommodation, we're going to be moving in Melissa Glover. So right now, this is just a soft warning saying, hey, we're going to be skipping these prospects that are ahead of Melissa Glover on the waiting list. You're going to need a reason why we're skipping them once we try to move Melissa in. Okay. So I'm going to click the Save button, and then my Do I wish to approve this prospect message comes up, and I'm going to click OK. So then once I click OK, my status for Melissa has gone from applied to approved. And if I scroll down here, I see that I have a little bit more options in front of me as well. One of the things that I'd like to point out is this occupancy check. The occupancy check button is a nice feature because it will go out on the Atlantic Housing Foundation database, so just your database and all of the properties that you have, and search for any duplicate Social Security numbers for that are on your database. So Melissa, we see, is coming up multiple times here, which is okay because they should have the same Social Security number. We saw that she was an applicant at some other point in for this property. So that would be okay. Also, if the property was different, that would be okay as well, right? Because they just applied at another property that's managed by Atlantic Housing Foundation. The area of concern, though, for this particular report is that if the name was different, then we would know, oops, there's something going on with the Social Security number. We're going to need to do some research to see why that Social Security number is not correct. This probably maybe we just entered it in incorrectly, and we need to just go back to our housing qualification steps and update properly. So that's about it. So again, that's a nice function that you can use at that step as well. Okay. Questions about this duplicate Social Security number report? Okay. Again, I got there on my execute lease step by clicking the occupancy check button. All right. Again, a lot of these options available to us on this step are very similar to the approve application step. In this case, though, we can execute our lease. I know that there's a lease doc button here, but on the 50059 side, we know that we have our HUD model lease that we need to produce, and also our 50059 full pack, which we will produce in a second for you. Okay. So at this point, we can click our execute lease, and a very similar window comes up for us as before. We can again put in the date and the time that we executed the lease. And then also I'm just going to pick Lisa again. And again, this field is for any additional comments about the execute lease step that we would like to add. And then also, again, our soft warning where it's telling us, here again, we're going to be skipping these prospects on the waiting list. We will need a reason coming up very soon. So then once I click the Save button, my execute lease message comes up, and I can click OK. And that's going to update my prospect and my applicant now to a future resident status. Any questions about that step? Okay. Also, so as we can see here, Melissa Glover, her address is staying the same for us, and all of her information is staying the same. That's not going to change until we move in Melissa officially. Okay, so that's going to happen in a second. Also down below, I see that I have a 50059 data table with our move-in certification. We have a couple links here that we're going to drill down in on a second, but this gives us information about our move-in certification, the effective date of the move-in certification, the contract rent, the total tenant payment, utility allowance, the tenant rent, and then the HAP portion. If there's something that was incorrect about our resident information, we can always hit this edit button. This is going to take us to that qualification steps workflow where we can update any income, assets, expenses, or household information. Also, if If I scroll down, this print button will, if I click on it, will produce just the 50059 certification, the paper certification. This is not the full pack. All right. In order to get to the full pack, we need to click on the MI link that's next to it. And this will take me to my 50059 summary page. On my summary page, there's really 4 sections here. There's my resident information at the top. That's section number 1. Section number 2 is actually the summary information down below, which gives me my transaction type. What type of certification is this? In my case, it's a move-in certification. The effective date of the move-in, and then when my next annual recertification is due. So in our case, it's due July 1st of 2016. There's also a place for me to put in owner and resident sign dates once they've signed the full pack in the HUD model lease. If the resident is unable to sign, there's an extenuating circumstances drop-down menu where we can select the reason that they were unable to sign. Also with the 50059 program, you'll notice that some fields have these mat links next to them. If we click on these mat links, this will take us to our mat guide. And it just won't take us to just the front of the mat guide. It will actually take us to the specific page that we are looking for. So in the instance where I selected that particular mat link, it took me to the extenuating circumstances codes for my definitions and my edits. Okay? So instead of having to search and look through the mat guide, we're doing that for you by quickly just clicking on those links. So that's a nice feature. And so for any one of these, it will take you right to the page that you're looking. So in this case, it's the eligibility check not required that I click next to. Any questions about that? Awesome. We want you to review the subsidy information to make sure that their subsidy type, their contract number, their eligibility universe, contract rents, utility allowances are all correct, because we're going to be using this information to bill our residents with post-rent and HAP, and also these are the same amounts that are going to end up on the voucher as well that we send to our contract administrator or to HUD. Okay, so if these amounts are incorrect, then our voucher amounts are going to be incorrect, and then we'll need to go back and fix those as well. So we just make sure that it's correct the first time. We won't have to worry about that moving forward. The third section is the derived information section, and this is, as you'll notice, a lot of these fields are grayed out because this is just all of the calculations that Voyager has done for us. So our calculation of the total annual income, household size, our low, very low, and extremely low income, TTP, tenant rent, HAP, and then any security deposits that are getting calculated as well. Okay. Again, we do have these mat links available to us. The fourth section is actually in the top right corner. This will allow us to create any memos for this particular summary screen. And then the reports drop-down has a number of options for us. We can still take a look at the ledger. We can print just the 50059 certification, or we can print the 50059 full pack. The full pack is something that we will need to print out at move-in so that our resident can review and sign. Okay, so just give that a second to load. Also, that's available to us on that reports drop-down is our lease information. This is the HUD model lease. If we click go, that will load, and this is, again, something else that our resident will need to review and sign for us. Okay. Also, there's some helpful worksheets here. I'm not sure if you guys are using these within Voyager, but these are income and rent worksheets that can be accompanied with the resident file. The income worksheet is just a calculation worksheet of how Voyager got to its calculation. So in this case, there was no resident information that was input for the income and the assets, but we also will add in any dependent allowances that are due as well to calculate into the adjusted income. Close that. And let's try that, running the full pack one more time. Looks like it got hung up on something. Any questions about this summary screen? Again, the summary screen is going to be very important to us because our contract rent, utility allowance, TTP, and HAP amounts are all going to be derived from this step. All right. So I'm writing down a note that this is hanging up on me. All right, so let me actually take a look at that 50059 full pack and why it's not coming up, or the HUD lease. That will be something I do after our webinar. Okay. I'm going to close this move-in certification. Also, something else that I want to show you is on the other info tab. If I scroll down, I see that some of my driver's license information and my social security number are going to come over. Okay. Questions about that as well? All right. So once we've decided to move in Melissa Glover, we need to go to the function section, and then there's a move out link right above. However, since sometimes these move-in dates are moving targets for us, we have an adjust move-in dates link available to us on the resident screen. Another thing that I want to show you is if I click home and go back to the dashboard, is that on my calendar I can see that there's a move-in link here available to me for Melissa Glover as well for 7/10/2015. So the move-in for tomorrow. Okay, so that's another option for us. So if I click on Melissa Glover, though, I want to go to the function section and adjust my move-in dates. And on my adjust move-in dates function, I can take a look again, these two sections that are on this screen here, my resident information at the very top, and then I can update my lease information at the bottom. So my move-in, I can change that to today's date. And then I can also update my lease information to 7/9/2015 as well. Once I've reviewed all the information, I can click the Post button. And my dates now have been adjusted. So I can see my lease from dates have been adjusted here on the lease from field. And then also very important to me is my move-in certification. The July 9/2015 effective date has also been updated as well. If I drill down on my 50059 certification, this is, gives me a message at the top that says, please review and save. We want you to review the information on the subsidy information, the derived information, to make sure that it's accurate. Once you've confirmed that it's accurate, we want you to click Save, and now that message is going to go away, and my qualified household message will show up. Is there any questions about that process when updating the move-in date? Very easy, very straightforward. Okay. Also, on my dashboard, my move-in count has moved up from 1 to 2, and my calendar has also been updated with a move-in for today. If I drill down on the number 2 here, I can see that Melissa Glover now is showing up, and I can click the move-in button here. This will take me to the move-in screen for us. We can input the owner and resident sign dates. Again, if there's any extenuating circumstances, we can select here, and if you need assistance, there's always the MAC Guide link. Also, if you'll notice, all the other buttons here are grayed out for me, and they will stay grayed out until we save the previous information for that section. So if you notice here, there's 4 sections. There's my move-in information. We're going to review the information for my contract rent, HAP amounts, tenant rent, utility allowance. So let's click Save. You'll notice that my Quick Post Preview now is available to me. My Quick Post Preview, on my Quick Post Preview screen is where I can see all of my move-in charges for my resident. So I'll have my unit information, my resident information, the certification for which I'm getting this information from, the effective date of the move-in. Is this a new certification? So since it's a move-in, it will be a new certification. Then I can take a look at my resident rent, the HAP portion, and then my date range will give me my prorated and regular rent amounts going forward. So my date range is for a deposit, so there's my $25 deposit that's available to me. Also, the date ranges from my move-in date to the end of July, and then my regular rent charges for August and September. Now, because this is a mid-month move-in, all of my certifications information for my voucher have all been sent for August already. So this is going to automatically charge all the way up until September voucher for me, because that's the first time a move-in in the middle of July will hit the voucher. Okay, will hit the September voucher. Also in the adjust column, there's some ADJs here. This has to do with our affordable gross rent change, or I'm sorry, affordable and gross potential rent report. Right? We put these in an adjustment column for you since they are not part of July or August regular rent charges. Again, we have our deposit column, which will give us our total deposit amount for our security deposit. If we drill down on that number, it will give us an explanation of where it's getting that. So that's our regular deposit charge of $25. Moving over, there's our rent charges. If we had any, would show up in this column. Since this is a renter that does not have any, or a negative renter, sorry, they do not have any rent. So also in the EI field, that's for our Section 236 program. That's for any excess income. This person is a Section 8 type of subsidy, so they're not going to have any EI. And then URP is their utility reimbursement payment. So this is a payable that will be created for $82, and if we drill down on that, it will give us how it got to that number. So it's 23 days at $3.55 per day. It's $81.65, and then using per the MAC guide rounding rules, we will need to round up to $82. Okay. So in this case, not only is Voyager able to create the charges, but for utility reimbursements, it's able to create payables as well. I'm going to close that. If we drill down on the 110, it's not as exciting because our explanation is just 1 month's URP amount at $110. If we go over to the URP REC, this is any recovery for possibly a misrepresentation of income a couple months back, and now we need to recover some of that utility reimbursements payments that were overpaid to a resident. On the half amount is our regular HAP payment, and again, the same item. If we drill down on that link, we will be able to see how the adjustments and the proration is calculated as well. Okay. Questions about that? This is just our quick post preview. I'm going to close this screen. And once we've reviewed that, we can see now that our remove from affordable waiting list button is now available to us. We can remove them from the waiting list. So we require you to remove from the waiting list before we can move in. At the very top here, we have our move-in information. So we can move them in. So they moved in at noon today. And again, the move-in comment, if there's any additional comments, we can add that in. Now, remember that when we were approving their application and executing their lease, there was that soft warning saying that we were going to need to provide a reason. And here is that reason now. So we are now required to give a reason why we are skipping these residents on the waiting list. Each resident will have their own field that is blue. We can type in there in a free-form field. Right. Let's say that in Glover required reasonable accommodation. Okay. So we can either do one by one like that, or right at the top here, if there's a general reason for skipping, we can type that reason up into this field, hit the apply button, and it will autofill all of the reasons for skipping down below. Okay. And then once we click the Save button, that will remove Melissa Glover from the waiting list, and then also those reasons for skipping will show up on those corresponding prospects' contact logs. Once we do that, our Commit Move-In Post button is now available to us, and we can click Post to post those move-in charges that we reviewed for the Quick Post preview. Are there any questions about that?
No questions about that, but it's Liz. What happened to entering their income and assets and printing those certification letters? Is that
do you want me to
was that
quickly
done for this resident? Yeah, I mean, I guess, yeah. How could you skip that?
Well, that was just the information that was input. Didn't look like there was any in there for her. I can.
Well, that's what I'm wondering. Why would that mean normally?
Yeah, we would be verifying any of that
be
income and assets. Yeah, they most likely wouldn't have zero income. It was just going off the data that was in the test database. So we can quickly go over inputting the household qualification steps if you like.
Yeah, are you all entering this, or just curious? And using the letters in the system, Yannette?
Are they on the call still? Do they drop off?
Is anybody on the call?
I'm here.
Linda, Yannette, are you all entering the data on the residents for screening and producing the certification letters?
Let me see here. I see that Althena Graham is on the, Caroline is muted. I don't know. Can somebody possibly ping them or shoot them an email and see if they're having technical difficulties? Hello?
Yeah, I will, but let's just go ahead and show us how to, the data needs to be entered and use the letters to print.
Yeah,
for
so
income,
you mean
so
the
I'm not
letters
sure
as in third-party verification letters?
Right.
Okay. So on that resident information, if there's an update that needs to be made, let's say that there was an error, we can see that the edit button here is still available to us. We can edit the information that is on their certification. We can enter in any additional family members or remove them. If we click the next button here, we can add in some income information. And clicking on that add new income information, we can select the member for which this income source applies. So let's say that it's Melissa Glover, the head of household. The income source can be pension, TANF, Social Security, general assistance. Let's give her a non-federal wage. Also with the SSN claim number, this is a Social Security claim number. So if you had a spouse and they were collecting Social Security and they passed away, and now the widowed spouse is now claiming a portion of that Social Security, they could put their claim number in there as well. The payment frequency is how often they get a check for this income source. So since it's non-federal, let's say that they get paid biweekly. And once we click into the pay periods per year, Voyager is going to automatically update that to 26. So that will automatically get updated. Let's say they get paid monthly. Since there's 12 months in a year, it will auto update to 12. In our example here, it's biweekly at 26. The current wages is their regular wage, right? So dollars per hour is how much they're getting paid per hour. Let's say they're getting paid, let's $10 per hour, and then how many hours per period that they're working. So if I'm working full-time at 40 hours a week and I get paid biweekly, my hours per period is going to be 80, right? Because I'm working those 2 weeks at 40 hours a week. If there was an overtime rate or a second overtime rate, we can add that in as well. Also, if there was an anticipated wage change, we could add that in. So starting on a particular date, we can also add in a new rate change, right, and new overtime rates if applicable. And then the income at the current rate for 366 days is $20,800. So Voyager is going to do the math for me. And that math is being calculated by dollars per hour times hours per period times pay periods per year. Okay. I know it says 366 days, and that's because 2016 is a leap year. So there is an additional day to account for. Also, if we had put in any items in the anticipated wage change area, they will come up in the income at the new rate. We'll see a quick example of that in a little bit. Our total annual wage is still $20,800. Commissions, bonuses, and tips, if they're reporting those, we'll input there. If there's any other annual income amount that needs to be added, we can add that into this field. If there's a unique calculation of their annual income, you will want to check this box. So this box would be checked if we're unable to calculate all these unique different, possibly overtime rates, and we've had to do some items, some calculations by hand, and those are in the filing cabinet. We'll want to check that so that anybody looking at this can say, oh, I need to take a look at the file. Oh, there it goes. Yeah, it still says, okay, so, oh, there you are. And I think you're going to have to give me,
Again?
yeah.
Oh, wait. Presenter. Show my screen. Okay. I can't change it to you. Are you the presenter now? Yeah, I guess.
No, it still says that you're the presenter.
Okay.
Let me try this. Let me leave and then re-enter.
I can't, yeah.
Give me a second here.
Now you're not there.
Yeah, I should be coming back up. There I am.
Okay.
And go ahead and see if you can make me the presenter.
I think I just did.
Okay. Up there.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, there we go. Back online. Okay. Okay. So it looks like, so then also here the verification letter, so kind of going back, so we've kind of stepped away. Any questions about the income screen, adding in an income? We're going to show you how to add in another income in a second here so that we can see that anticipated wage change.
Okay, so is Althea or Carolyn on the call? Can you respond whether or not you're entering this data? Well, I guess we're not getting, I don't know what the problem is.
Okay. Do you want me to stop, and do you want to do some
going.
research, or do you want to just keep going?
Just keep
Okay. So any questions, just trying to kind of get us refocused back on the Voyager here. Any questions about the income? Again, if there's any expenses so that this household can work and they need child care for either disabled child care or both, we can add in that expense here down at the bottom, right? These are for items, this is for child care or care codes that are required in order for this household to work. Down at the bottom is where we can add in our verification letters, right? These are our third-party verification letters where we can select our 50059 wages verification employment, and then who are we going to be sending this to, right? So at this point there are correspondents that we can send these letters to. We can say that they work at the Boys and Girls Club, click OK, and then click Save. So once we click Save, we've added that income to, or we've added that letter to our verification letter stack. And on this verification step here, we'll be able to print out those letters and send them. I quickly just want to add in a new income. Let's say that this is for child support, and they're getting a child support check monthly, and let's say that they're getting $300 a month. Yes, it looks like they are. So $300 a month in child support, and then hours per period in this case would just be 1 because they're only getting that $300 per month. But let's say that there's an anticipated wage change in the child support. Let's say that as of January 1, 2016, they're now going to be receiving $320 of child support per month. That will get updated as well. So down below here in the income at current rate at 176 days, Voyager is going to do the math and say that, okay, for July 9th through the end of the year, they'll make a total of $1,731, and then starting January 1st through the end of this certification, there'll be $1,993.10. Okay? Then our total annual change. And then again, we can attach a letter to this where we're receiving the child support verification letter, and then also, I don't see anything for HUD there. Then we can add that letter to get sent off. All right, let's go ahead and click next here. We can also add in assets for a member. All right, so the description here is possibly what I like to do is putting a checking account, right, for the description, and then the last 4 digits of the checking account number. That way, if there's any updates that need to take place, we can quickly just review those last 4 digits to make sure that we're updating the correct account. We do have 2 status that we can select, either current or imputed. Current is for any current assets that we're holding, anything that can be liquidated today, so checking accounts, savings accounts, right? 401ks are even considered current in Voyager. Imputed, though, imputed assets are for those assets that have been disposed of in the last 2 years below market value. Let's say they sold their house for below market value. We'll need to put that in as an imputed asset into Voyager. So in our example here, checking, we will just put in checking and then current. The date divested, though, if this was that house that they had sold below market value, this is the date that they would have sold the house. In our case, since this is a checking account, we haven't sold this, so we can leave that blank. And then we want to put in the market value of what the checking account's at. This would also be, for the example of that house, this would be the market value of the house. The divestiture cost is the cost at which they sold this asset. So for a checking account, this is just going to be 0, because 0 is a valid entry. But the divestiture cost is, and again, using the house as the example, is the price at which they sold that house. Voyager will calculate the cash value, and if they're receiving any interest, 0 again is a valid entry, then the actual income per year that they're receiving. Again, we see a date verified, and then we see our verification letters. And Voyager has some out-of-the-box verification letters, 50059 banking, and then we can also send these to the bank here. So here's a credit union. If for whatever reason you do not see a correspondent, or this is a new correspondent that we will be sending these letters to, we can always add a correspondent right there at the very top of that section. There's an add correspondence button where we can give in a new code, a description, then put in our contact information for that new correspondent. Okay. Any questions about the asset screen? Go ahead and click Save, and then click Next. The expense step is for our elderly or disabled households. We have the opportunity to put in any medical or disability expenses that they might have. In our case, the head, co-head, or spouse is not elderly or disabled, so that's not going to be an option for us at this point. Click Next. Then here we can input our household information, what type of subsidy, their displacement status, and their previous housing. If there's a particular waiver that they qualify for, we can select that. If there's any unborn children, future foster children, or adoptees, again, we can select those numbers in there. And then again, eligibility check not required. If we're not sure what that's for, again, we can always use the MAT guide or the MAT link there and go to the eligibility check not required, and then see the example. So this is for transfers or contract combinations. That'd be a reason why we would check that box. Okay. Since this is a move-in, we're not eligible for that, so we can click the next button. And then on the next button, we see on the verification step, these are the letters that we've printed out for ourselves. We can click the letters button to produce these letters. And once those have been populated for us, and I'm not sure why our letters are not coming up. Can anybody tell me if they usually see these letters or the certifications? I know that these were coming up last time I did a webinar for you guys. Anybody? Does anybody else have issues pulling these up?
No, I haven't tried.
We need to hear from Carolyn, Yannette, Althea, or Linda.
Yannette and Linda is currently dealing with a situation with the police, so they're not here right now.
Okay.
Okay. Very valid reason. Okay. I've not tried these. Okay, so let me take a look. I know that when we did our other webinar a couple weeks ago, these were working. I'm not sure. Maybe it's just something on my computer that I need to fix, but I'll do some research afterwards. But once our letters have been produced, we can print those out, and then we can fold those stuff, seal those letters, and then mail them off. And then once we put them in the mail, we can hit the send button here, and the send button will automatically put in a date sent for us on the date sent field. Okay, and then once at that point, we can click next, and it looks like I gave my resident a little bit too much money, so let's go ahead and just update the non-federal, and let's say that she makes $8 an hour. save. And then whenever we update the income, we need to remember to go back to that validation step. That way, that will recalculate our information. So at this point here, we have our qualified household data information. We see that the certification type, the effective date, the contract number, their annual income, their adjusted annual income, their Section 8 is their subsidy type, and then their income status and their TTP, which is 485. Okay. Now, there's a warning here saying that we haven't run screening. Again, you guys will be running your screening during these move-ins. In my case, I'm just going to click the override screening because I don't want to accidentally run screening for you guys and then you guys get charged for it. But at this point, we can always pull up our 50059 full pack and our model lease. Right? And then, again, once we get our verification letters back, we can always hit the previous button. And once that information comes back to us, we can hit these edit buttons here and update any information that we see that is not correct, right, or that we need to adjust. So that's a nice feature there as well. And then once we have those letters come back to us, we can always just input those dates that they responded back, click the next button to save that information. Okay, questions about that?
It's me, Jeanette. I'm back on the call.
Okay.
Liz, you had a question for me before?
I think we got it answered.
Well, using the letters in Yardi for certifications, and because I don't seem to see any receive dates, or are y'all using those, or?
Not in Yardi, no, not always.
Why not?
No.
Is there a reason?
No, no particular reason. I guess the staff doesn't probably feel comfortable with it yet.
Yeah, that's what we were trying to do. So let's go through that one more time real quick, just so you're comfortable with where they are and how to print
I know
them.
where they are. I
Okay.
just need to get the staff. The staff needs to get, yes, it's not something that they touched on before, so they just need to get comfortable with it.
Okay.
Okay, we just covered it. Is Carolyn? You haven't tried it either?
No.
No, she hasn't.
Okay.
Yeah,
So this is
remember,
important.
she will be assistant manager, so she will be doing more of that now.
So let's go over it one more time, Matt. This is why we're having this call, so we start using Yardi for all this.
Yeah, so this is a nice feature. It's actually going to make this a little bit more streamlined for you guys. That way you're not having to go outside of Voyager when inputting this information. So we can find our verification letters on the qualification step. In our family members section, when we add in a family member, it's going to be at the very bottom. So for family member information, you might be trying to verify age, right? That would be something that we use for a verification letter. For our income, the example that we used for Melissa Glover is that we were verifying her income information. And in here at the very bottom, if we click this button here, we see that our out-of-the-box letters show up. Now, these letters can be modified and customized to your needs. Maybe you want to add in another paragraph or a logo, right, for Atlantic Housing Foundation. We are more than happy to do that and work with you on that. And then we have some different kinds here of income information letters. So maybe their income source is child support or disability, military pay, student income, unemployment. 5-9 wages is for their regular employment, non-federal working, any workers' compensation. And then so also kind of just a hint here that the 5-9 in the code section, if it has 5-9 before it, it's for the 50059 program. And then if it has a TC before it, that's for the tax credit program. So just be aware of that. And then once you select that, you'll also want to select who to send it to. And we have some right now correspondence set up. These are some correspondence that you guys have set up in your database so far. It looks like it's a little slow for me at the moment. But these are correspondence in which we can send these letters to. And if we don't see anybody that's on that list, maybe it's a new correspondent, we can always add a correspondent. There's an Add Correspondence button right above the verification letters table. We can add in a new correspondent, maybe for Home Depot or Walmart or the bank, whatever that new correspondent may be. And also we'll be required to put in a contact to which to send that to as well. We can also restrict this correspondent to a particular property or property list, right? That's pretty nice because maybe if we're sending it to the Home Depot, there could be multiple Home Depots across different counties, and if you have different properties in different locations, maybe they use a different Home Depot correspondent, right? So that's a nice feature as well. Okay. So then once we've added in those correspondent letters for income and assets, and again, they're always going to be found at the bottom of that data entry screen, and the same thing for expenses. On the verification step is where we'll be able to produce these letters all at one time. So instead of having to print them out one at a time, we can click this letters button here, and the letters button will produce all of our letters, in our case 3 letters, all at once, so that we can print them all out, review them, fold them, stuff them, seal our letters, and then mail those off. Once we've put them in the mailbox, we can hit the send button here so that we have a date sent automatically input. Now when those letters come back to us, right, in a response, hopefully very speedy, we can update quickly any of the information that might need to be adjusted by clicking on this edit link here. That will take us right to that data entry screen where we can update the information with the validated information. Okay. Once those people have responded back, we can input a response date, and then we can move forward. So these dates, I don't know if you noticed, but they correspond to the very bottom here on our data entry screen. So we can input all of the information here rather quickly, and it carries over to our data entry screens for income, assets, family members, and expenses. Okay. Questions about that process? Any concerns? Again, it's very streamlined within the qualification steps. So we want you to be using Voyager for everything and not have to leave Voyager and then come back in, right? So everything's right in front of us still. Go ahead and close that tab. And that's Melissa Glover on the move-in. Any questions with that process of moving people in? Anything like that? Nope. Okay. Let's go ahead. I'm going to hit the home button here, and this is going to take me back to my dashboard. And the next item on our list that I want to talk about are recertification notices. So recertification notices are letters that we send to our residents 120 days, 90 days, and then 60 days before they have an annual recertification due. This is notifying them that we need to set up a meeting with them and get all of their updated family member information, asset information, income information, and or possibly their expenses information. So one of the things that I want you to use that's a really helpful tool, especially in the 50059 side, is our monthly procedures menu right here located at the very top. If we click this, we see that we have 2 columns here, one for 50059 monthly procedures, tax credit monthly procedures, and then we'll also have a column for reports. But since we're focusing in on 50059 today, let's just focus in on that 50059 monthly procedures column. And you'll notice that all of these links here can also be found on the left side menu, but they're a little bit easier to find here on the monthly procedures because sometimes on this left side menu, we can have to drill down kind of far to get places. In this case, there's 3 different menus we have to drill down to just to get to review special claims or HAP receipts, right? But from this screen, we can quickly add in any special claims. We can also add in our HAP receipts right from this screen, so less clicks. Also at the very top here, we see that recertification notices is the first link. You may also notice that they're all numbered sequentially. This is typically the best practices of Yardi telling you, saying, hey, this is typically how this monthly procedures go. Our clients like to run their notices first and then process special claims, update their resident information, prepare any repayment agreements, run and audit HAP postings, and then process tracks, HAP receipts, and then resident receipts. So it's in order of how we feel is best practices in the order of which you do your monthly procedures, right? So again, kind of focusing back in on these recertification notices, we can click this link, and this will take us to our recertification notices. Now, if you're still comfortable with the left side menu, going to 50059 functions, recertification notices, still feel free. I'm just showing you a different way to get to this screen. Whatever way that you're doing it and are comfortable with is the correct way. So don't feel any pressure from me to change that process up. Just kind of quickly showing you a place where everything is located all in one nice column for you. On my recertification notices filter, we can input our resident or contract information for a specific contract or a specific resident. In our case, if we're running these at the beginning of the month, we can just run these for all at once, right? So we want to run it for multiple residents. That way we're not having to come back to this filter screen 100 times and run this, okay? Our due to be sent date is a required field. These are the dates that are due to be sent. I see a lot of my clients input the first of the month through the end of the month. If we want to narrow this down a little bit further by the annual recertification date, maybe we want to just take a look at all the letters for people that have annual recertifications due September 1st. We can put those days in here. And then on the notice type is we have 4 selections here. We have first, second, final, and all. So this corresponds to the notice that is due to be sent for the time span of July 1st through the end of July. So we can either run these as for just the people that just need their first notice, people that just need their second notice, or people that just need their final notice. Or we can run it for everybody all at once by selecting the all option. For the report letters and post option, we have 3 options for us, and again, those are just report letters and post. And I like to run these in order, right, from top to bottom. I like to run report first, then come back to this filter screen, run letters, and then also finally come back once we verified all of our letters have been sent, hit the post button, right? That post button is going to be very important to us not to skip, because that way we can track who's been sent a letter and who has not. So let's start with the report first. The date on the letters is the date that we're sending these letters. I'm just going to use today's date. Usually this would be either the 1st, 2nd, or 3rd of the month that you're running these. And then my destination is just going to be to screen, and I'm going to run my report. So the report is nice because we can see everybody who needs a letter, and then we can use this report to audit all of our letters that are going to get printed out in a second, right? So we can see everybody who needs a first notice, everybody who needs a second notice, and then everybody who needs a final notice, okay? And then also we'll have information about the resident, the program that they're on, their contract number, when their next annual recertification is, and then when these letters are due to be sent. As you'll notice, some of these letters are due to be sent on the 3rd, and some of them are due to be sent on the 4th. And that's because HUD specifies that on 120 days, 90 days, and 60 days are the actual number of days. So it's not always going to fall on the 1st due to months that have 31 days in them. Okay. Is there any questions about that? Nope. Okay. So once we've printed this report out, we can go back to my monthly procedures, recertification notices, and you'll notice that my filter will stick with all of the information that I've input previously. So in this case, I can hit my report letters post flag and change that to letters, just quickly scanning over to make sure that all my information is correct, and I can click submit. And running this with letters will produce all of my letters for me at one time. Okay. So this will produce all of my letters for my first, second, and final notices. Once these have been produced, I can audit these letters with my report that I just printed out and make sure that all of my residents that have shown up on that report are getting letters. Okay. Are there any questions about that?
Oh, yeah. Linda, are you using these? Linda Hendricks?
She's not back as yet.
Okay.
All right. So finally, once we've sent these letters and put them in the mail, we'll want to come back to this screen, and this is the very important step here, and we want to run this as post. This tells Voyager that we have printed our letters and put them in the mail and sent them off to our residents. We're going to track this information for you, right, on one of our compliance reports and also on the resident certification. So if I go to my monthly procedures, and in my reports column, there's a compliance reports link that I can click on. And in my report type drop-down menu, I want to select scheduled annual recertifications. I'm going to summarize this by my residents. I am going to say all pending certs due within the next 120 days. And my program type for this property is 50059. So then at that point, I can click display and see all of the notices that have been sent out that are due. So here are my 7-9 annual recertifications that are due to be sent. These people here at the top are all residents that have certifications due in the next 30 days. So remember, we didn't send them any information about recertifying because they're outside of that 60-day limit. We only sent it to people who had the 120, 90, and 60 days to recertify. But for our 31 to 60 days, we'll send them their third and final notice here. And then also we'll put in for the 90 days, their second notice, and then for the 120 days, we'll put in their first notice as well. Down here, there's any pending certifications that are overdue. They'll let us know about those, and then any overdue certifications that are incomplete. So this is more information about what's going on with our certifications and our compliance side. But one thing that I want to show you here is that if we drill down on one of the residents that we just sent a letter to, if I open up their latest certification, in this case it's an IR correction, and I scroll down, there's a notices date section on this summary page, and on that first day, on that first 120, I see that it automatically populates that information on when we sent those letters, right? So the date that it's going to be using is the date that we chose on the filter screen on the due to be sent date. So, okay, so we use today's date. So for our residents, let's say that one of them replies back and we've set up our information for them. We set up a meeting. We've collected all of their information, right? There is a notice response date here at the bottom. So this certification, if I scroll back up to the top, does not have a save button. But if we notice next to this notice response date, there's an update button. And here's where we want to put the date that we that we no longer require a recertification notice to be sent out, right? So they may have responded to the letter and set up an email, but they may not have shown up for that meeting, okay? So in that case, they need another letter out to be sent to them. So this will be something that you guys want to discuss internally, is which specific date that you want to put this in here. Do you want it to be when you have finalized the annual recertification, you're ready to print that out and have the residents sign that new AR? Or do you want it to be a little bit sooner when you've confirmed all the information once all the verification letters have come back? That will be up to you, and I'm kind of giving you those options. But once that date has been decided internally for you guys, you'll want to make sure that everybody is aware of this new policy, if it is a new policy, and then come in here and input that particular date that they've responded and click update. Once that date has been input, Voyager will no longer send them any letters, okay? So when we pull up that notice, that recertification notices filter, and there's a date in here, they will no longer get a letter from Voyager. If this was done by mistake, we can easily just clear that date out and hit the update button again, and that will clear out that date for us, okay? So if it accidentally gets input, we can always come back in and remove that date and click update. Questions about that process? Okay. Go ahead and hit the home button here. So let's say that we have Crystal Sawyer has come in. She's responded to her recertification notice. We've set up a meeting. We've sat down with her. She's given us all of her information, and we are ready to start an annual recertification for her. So on my dashboard, what I can do underneath the annual certs due, there's a link for 51, and I can click on that, and now I can find Crystal Sawyer. So if I can always change my column here to sort by first name, and I'm looking for the C's, and here's Crystal Sawyer. So from Crystal Sawyer, I can see that her latest certification is a GR. She has an AR that's due August 1st. It's a 50059 certification. If there's an X in these columns here for tax credit, home, or RD, that's the program they need the annual recertification for. The family info button will give us the information for their GR. And if we click the new AR button, this will produce a new AR for us, right? So she has an AR that's due August 1st. So if I take a look at my dashboard one more time, I just hit the home button to refresh the page. I notice that my annual certs due has gone from 51 to 50, and my incomplete certs have gone from 2 to 3. And I'll notice that Crystal Sawyer is now available for me there as well. Okay, so clicking that button will actually create the annual recertification. And here I can update any information that Crystal Sawyer has provided for us. All right, let's say that she got a little bit more income, and now she started her own checking account. Zero, zero. All right. The nice thing also that I want to point out is that when we start using the verification letters, let's say for instance for income, those letters will automatically come over, much like all the information from our GR also came over as well. So if we've entered in verification letters for their move-in, those will get carried forward through all the AR, IR process. Right. Also, some items will not need to be recertified every year. Let's say for family member information, where we are verifying age at move-in, that letter will not get carried over because, well, that's something we don't need to recertify every year. However, for income, assets, and expenses, those are items that we will likely need to recertify every year. Does that make sense? And does anybody have any questions about that? We can always then revalidate the certification, click done, and now Crystal Sawyer has her new annual recertification. Right? We can always open that up and then print out our full packs and then have the resident sign that. Any questions about the annual recertification process? No? Okay. The other item that might come up for us on the 50059 side is an interim certification. So these are for any income changes, asset changes, family member changes. So in the example that I will pitch to you is a very common one. A resident comes into the office and they have lost a source of income, right? So let's say that we have Rhonda Jefferson has walked into the office and she's let us know that she has lost some income. So I can open up Rhonda Jefferson. I can open up her latest certification. And in that fourth section that I was talking about on the summary screen, we can select functions and then interim recertification and then click go. This is a message saying continue with the interim. Yes. And click OK. And my screen's going to refresh. I see my transaction type is an IR. And my trans effective date is the date for which this IR is going to take effect. So these are usually done at the beginning of the next month, so 8/1/2015. And as you can see, interim recertifications are not going to interfere with our annual recertification schedule. New in 202D is a requirement for any IRs that are created is this done through an EIV finding? So in our example here for Rhonda Jefferson, she came into the office. So this was not through EIV. However, if you would have found this through an EIV finding, you would mark this EIV indicator to yes. However, in our scenario, that's going to be set to no. And then at that point, I can click Save, and now I'll have my family information button available to me, which is another way of getting to my qualification step. And in this case, I can add or remove any income. So let's say now that since it looks like Rhonda's working again, she's no longer receiving her unemployment, right, because she has a non-federal, and now her unemployment is up. There's a delete button available. Are you sure you want to delete this? Click OK. And now that unemployment income source is gone. If there was any updates to their non-federal wages, we could update those as well, or any family members. Again, we could update assets, expenses, household information. Verification letters, again, will come over if we need to verify that income source. Again, I get that warning message about overriding screening. Since I don't want to interfere or charge you guys for anything, I'm just going to override that. And then I can click Done. And then I can, again, print out my full pack for my resident to sign, and we can input that information, the owner and resident sign dates, so that it gets processed on the next voucher. Okay. Questions about interim recertifications? Okay. I'm going to go back to my dashboard again, and I'm going to go on to the next certification that is for the 50059 program, and those are corrections. Now, just a quick backstory on corrections. Correction certifications are for any certifications that we have already processed, charged against, put on our voucher. That voucher has been processed to HUD, and HUD is paid HAP against that certification, right? Sometimes in special circumstances, our contract administrators or HUD will require us to do a correction that's outside of the scenario that I originally gave. But most likely, these are corrections are any certifications that HUD has already paid HAP against. Okay. So I do have a scenario here for Angela Fogel. And through an EIV finding, and I misspelled her name, and through an EIV finding, we find out that Angela Fogel, that her Social Security number on the move-in IR1, it was incorrect. So we already see here that Angela Fogel has a correction already, but there's a correction to that correction. So in order to update that, again, we want to drill down on the move-in certification. We want to go to the top right corner, Functions, Correction, and then click Go. Once we click Go, we can update any information. This is an EIV finding in this case. And then we can click Save. There is a correction information section down below where there are different types of corrections. So in our case, this is a corrects owner or CA cert error. This is administrative resubmission or corrects tenant misreporting if there's some tenant misreporting as well. Okay. And then here from our family information, we can update the Social Security number that was incorrect. Maybe this should have been a 3 instead of a 2. We can click Save. And again, as always, we want to next through so that Voyager can recalculate our information, revalidate, click Done, and again, we'll need to print out a full pack and have the resident sign it so that we can input our owner and resident sign dates for our correction.
Just a quick question. Under that reports drop down, there was a post. What's that for?
Those are older functions. So these are verify, preview, and verify, and post. Those are older functions that have been kind of obsolete for a little bit. We do have some other clients that use those, but those are primarily used during the move-in process or the move-out process, because those are essentially our quick posts. That's all that that's doing. So in order to streamline that process better, we just kind of already have that window to streamline that for you. Okay. All right. Any other questions?
And just one other. And the full pack, what is that versus the full pack?
The 50059 full pack is all of the 50059 information. It's not just the certification. There's additional content with that full pack where there's more stipulations and more of the regulations that HUD requires. Whenever a resident is going to sign a certification, it is required by HUD that the full pack be presented. And so the difference there is just that additional HUD content, while the 50059 selection is just the certification.
Yes, it contains, Liz, the notice of rent adjustment comes with the full pack, and the notice for the next annual recertification when you do an annual research.
Okay, and you're using that full pack?
Of course.
Okay.
Good question. Anything else with the corrections? The next certification that I want to go over with you is terminations. So terminations are for any findings where we find out that one of our 50059 residents has started to make enough money where their total tenant payment is either equal or exceeds the gross rent. So I do have a scenario set up for us with Miller here. And we found out with Miller that on an EIV finding on an interim recertification for May 1, 2015, if I open this up, that they're an unqualified household. Once I drill down on that unqualified household, I get a message saying that household is not eligible for the Section 8 because their TTP of 670 is equal or exceeds the gross rent of 670 as well. So in that case, what we want to do is create our termination certification, right? So usually these are done with not the IR that we discovered this on, but from their previous certification. And I'm going to open up the GR. I'm going to go to Functions, and I'm going to create a termination, and then click Go. So for all of our other certifications, our effective date is usually the first of the month, and in extremely rare cases, IRs can be in the first or in the middle of the month. But again, those are extremely rare circumstances. But for our termination certifications, we want to put this as the last day that they were going to be receiving subsidy. So in our case, we built this off the GR that was effective for 1/2015. We found out through an EIV finding that as of May 1, 2015, they no longer qualified for that Section 8. So in this case, because of that 5/1 IR, they're no longer eligible starting 5/1. So we want to put the last day that they were receiving Section 8 subsidy. So in this case, it's going to be 4/30/2015. Are there any questions about why I'm picking that particular date? No. Okay. Once we have that last date there, we can click Save. Oh, and this was through an EIV finding. And then also down below, there's a move-out termination information reason. There's a termination reason drop down here at the very bottom. In our case, the TTP equals or exceeds the gross rent, but we also have some other information. Possibly they did not recertify with us, right? We sent those notices out. That's why it's important for us to have those dates posted to their latest certification so that we have some audit trail of us sending those letters to the resident. That way there's not a technicality in which there's a misstep, right? There's a HUD abated unit or they're double subsidy. Right? So we have those options available to us. Again, we do have the MAT guide link available to us if we want some explanation on these different reasons as well. Okay. Questions about that? And then I can click Save, right? And then again, I have my 50059 full pack. Now for termination reasons, the owner sign date and the tenant sign date will need to be filled out. I'm not sure what circumstances you guys usually run into with the resident signing the TM, but you guys can use your best judgment. If there's an extenuating circumstance, you can add those in there as well. So any questions about terminations?
Just a quick one. Why didn't you do it on the IR again? Was that a later date?
That's because if any information changes on a termination, the TRAX is going to send that back to us as a fatal certification. It's not going to accept it if there's any changes from their previous certification.
Oh, I see. So you're just using it to duplicate, kind of.
Yeah, we're actually using Voyager in this case. Right, as literally as compliance software, right? That's what we're using it for. But here, even more so, because we're saying, oh, look, they've gone over. We need to create their termination certification, right? And also in Voyager, once we put sign dates on this termination certification, Voyager will ignore anything that's not an initial certification that's afterwards. So in this case, even though we have an IR, Voyager will no longer consider that. Then once somebody has been put on, has a TM, we can uncheck their 50059 checkbox and then click Save, removing them from the 50059 program. Okay. We can do that now. In the case of Miller here, though, since that happened on, and we'll also notice that I just want to point this out, on the tabs here, their affordable tab has gone away, but their certifications have not gone anywhere. If we go to the data section, and I'm going to just scroll over to the right a little bit, there's our 50059 certifications. Error message, not good. We do have that information is still available to us here. Here's their certification history, where we can take a look at all of their certifications from the past. If in the case of Miller, let's say that their new income source, they no longer have that income source, right? And they want to apply back for the 50059 subsidy program, we can always check again that 50059 checkbox, hit the Save button. We'll see that our 50059 information comes back up. We'll pull up our TM, right, our latest certification, go to Functions, and then there's an initial certification that we can select. Click Go. And here for their initial certification, let's say that they are qualifying, they're trying to qualify for the 8/1/2015 month, right? And then click Save. And then we can go through the family information again to update any of their income sources, assets, expenses, right? And then requalify them for the 50059 program. And then again, we'll need to print out the full pack, have the resident sign, and then input our owner and resident sign dates here as well, right? So that's if they lose that source of income again, and they now qualify for the 50059 program, right? Questions about that? And I accidentally hit the leash renewal. In the case of Miller, since they have that interim recertification hanging out there, you could always hit the delete button on that to get rid of it because it's no longer relevant, right? All right. So the last two items that we're going to touch upon are unit transfers and gross rent changes are the last two certification items that I would like to take a look at. So for our unit transfers, I want to take a look at Patrice Profit. And let's say that she's come into the office and said that she would like a unit transfer because of a reasonable accommodation. So let's search for Patrice here. Oh, I'm sorry. We don't need to search for Patrice. I can go to my monthly procedures. And in step number 3 here, there is a transfer unit link that I can click on. That will give me my transfer unit filter screen. I want you to take a close eye, keep a close eye on this notice of transfer date and see what happens when I put Patrice's resident ID in the resident field. Okay. So I'm going to click on the resident link and I am going to search for Patrice Profit. And there she is. I'm going to select her and click OK. And once the screen refreshes, I see that instead of a notice of transfer date, I see a UT effective date field instead. This is going to be the effective date of my unit transfer. Also, a nice tip here for you is that we cannot do unit transfers that are in the future. We cannot put a future date in this field. We can only put either a current date or a retroactive date, so some date that's in the past. Okay? Questions about that? That is a programming limitation currently in Voyager. So she is going to be going into apartment 10081, and her transfer date, let's say that it was at the beginning of the month, so 07/01/2015, and then we can click save, or submit, sorry. And then once we've started to process this information, we want to run this function here once we've swapped keys with our resident, right? So we've gotten the keys for their old apartment back, and we've given them the keys for their new apartment that is a reasonable accommodation. Then at the top, we'll have our resident information. Always important to double check that we have the correct resident. Their intended move-out date was 6/30/2015. They gave us notice as of April 1st, 2015. The transfer reason was a reasonable accommodation. Let's see if you guys have that. Seasonal renting, eviction. I don't see financial reasons. Transfer on site. Let's just do that. And then also below that is a custom data section. So for Atlantic Housing Foundation, you guys have two custom information fields set up for residents, which is bonded and revenue management. This doesn't hurt to move this information over. Sometimes this information is filled out. Sometimes it's not. It doesn't hurt either way to have those checked. Due to 500, I'm sorry?
I don't think we're using that.
Okay. Again, it doesn't hurt because it's just going to be moving over nothing, right? Include security deposit balance in transfer. This is a grayed out checkbox. This is due to 50059 regulations that requires that the security deposit get moved over during a transfer. Okay. Also, if we are inputting any EFT bank setup, right? So if we're removing if we're receiving an ACH from the resident at the beginning of the month for rent, or we are charging their credit card or using WIP setup, if that information has been set up for our resident, we can bring that over as well. And then we can input our new lease information, the property, which apartment we're going to, when the lease is starting, the lease term, and when it's ending. Our rent is to be decided, right, because our apartment size, bedroom sizes can change, my new move-in date, and if there's something that happened to that apartment, we need to change it. We absolutely can. And then once we're happy with that information, we can click next. Once we click next, we have the option of adding or removing any existing rentable items. There's none set up for this property, so I'm going to click the next button. And then lastly, we get to review our information for Patrice Profit, her existing lease information, her new lease information, and then any other details, right? That custom data, which was that revenue management and bonded, would come over. Any roommates that have been set up will come over as well, and then any new rentable items or removing rentable items will have information about that there. And then we can post our transfer. Once we posted our transfer, Voyager is going to create a new person, move them into the new apartment, and then transfer over all of the information such as ledger information, certification information, all those roommates and rentable items as well. Okay. So here's our new resident, right? All of the information has come over. If I take a look at the ledger, all of the ledger information will show up as well. Also, if we have a certification such as an AR or an IR effective on the same date, in this case we do, I'll notice that my unit transfer certification is not there, but my AR will also be flagged as a unit transfer as well. Okay. Any questions about that? So again, just to reiterate that, if we have a unit transfer the same date as a certification, another certification such as an IR and AR, it will mark that AR or IR as a unit transfer. One of the caveats there is that we need the AR or the IR certification to be created first before the unit transfer function is created, right? So again, we require that the AR or IR certification be created first, and then we perform our unit transfer. Questions about that?
Hi, this is Linda. I'm finally able to speak with you. I do have a question. Could you just run back over that unit transfer done with an AR or an IR?
Yes. So in our case here for Patrice Profit, she had an AR effective 7/1/2015. When we fired off the unit transfer function, it created a flag, or it flagged our AR certification also as a unit transfer. What this will do is it will update our unit code on our certification to the correct unit. Okay. Now, the order in which we should be doing this in order so that we can flag our IRs and ARs as a unit transfer is create our AR or IR certification first. We cannot create it second. It doesn't work in the reverse fashion. It will give us an error if we perform our unit transfer first and then try and create an AR and IR. It will tell us that we cannot have multiple certifications on the same date.
Gotcha. Okay, that was it. Thank you.
Excellent question. So does anybody need that to be reiterated to them? That's a very important piece to unit transfers, can make them a little bit more dynamic, especially if they're moving because they need more room. There's a new family member and they need an additional bedroom, right? We want to make sure that that IR is created with an additional family member, and then we can perform our unit transfer. That's another reason why we have our unit transfers required either the same day or retroactively. Okay. Also, with unit transfers, if there's an AR and IR that is happening afterwards, right? So it's very common that our annual recertifications happen about a month later, and we're in the process of creating those annual recertifications. It's very important that we review our annual recertifications and come down to the summary screen and make sure that they have the correct unit code available to us. If it is showing their old unit code, we will need that information updated, right? So we will need to get rid of this old annual recertification, right, by clicking delete and then creating a new annual recertification with the updated unit information, okay? So that's something very important to understand, is that if we perform a unit transfer, we should be checking to see if there's any future certifications that have already been created. And if they've been created, then we need to make sure that the unit codes are coinciding with the proper new unit. Okay. Questions about that? That's very important. Okay, just to reiterate that again, if we fire off the unit transfer function, we want to make sure that any future certifications that have already been created have the correct unit code on the summary screen. Okay. And those are unit transfers. Any questions in general about unit transfers? All right. The last, yes.
Is there any way that unit transfers can be done like we do with a notice, or do they always have to be done when you're going to physically do the unit transfer?
Physically, when you do the unit transfer, is the only way currently.
Yeah, that is the only way currently.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's the only way.
Okay.
All right. Good question. Any other questions? Okay. The last item here that I want to show you is the gross rent change in Voyager. So again, going to that monthly procedures menu, if I scroll down in step number 3, right above that transfer unit is a gross rent change link. I can select that link, and it's going to take me to my gross rent change filter screen. And for my gross rent changes, I want to do a gross rent change for all of my different unit types on that property. So, right, so for all my 1 bedrooms, all my 2 bedrooms, all my 3 bedrooms, because my utility allowances and contract rents will vary from bedroom size to bedroom size. So I'm going to select my unit type, and I'm going to select my RGA 383 2 bedrooms. I can always create this for a specific resident or a specific contract if necessary. But in most cases, we're just creating this in bulk, right? And what this function is going to do is create all my GR certifications for all of my residents at one time that are tied to this unit type. So if you have multiple unit types on a property, you have 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, and 3 bedrooms in this case, then you'll need to come back to this GR function 3 different times to create those GR certifications for our residents in those particular unit types. We can always put in the effective date of the GR, and we can always create future gross rent changes that are in the future. So let's say that it's 080115 that have been approved. We can also put in retroactive GR changes because sometimes they're not approved right away, and when they're not approved right away, sometimes months later they'll get approved, and we'll need to go back retroactively and update our information. We want to put in our new contract rent. Let's say that it's $575. Oops, how about I start typing? $575. Since this is a since this is not a Section 236 property, I'm just going to put 0 on my Section 236 basic rent. My utility allowance, let's say that's $122 now. And then my new market rent is, what are you guys using as your new market rent standard? Are you just using the contract rent, or are you using the contract rent plus utility allowances as your market rent?
No, just the contract rent.
Just the contract rent, okay?
Yes.
Now, post-pass tenants, yes or no? If this is a future gross rent change, we can just mark that to no. If this is a retroactive change, we want to mark this to yes. So again, if it's a retroactive gross rent change, we want to mark post-pass tenants as yes. Reason for this is, let's say that we are putting in a retroactive GR that was approved a little bit later, but what could have happened in between, let's say, April 1st and July 9th is some people may have moved out, right? We could have had some move-outs, but we still need to get paid for those people and the time that they were there. So what Voyager is going to do is it's going to post to those past residents so that when we run our voucher for August or September in our case at this point, then when we capture those gross rent changes, they will get paid for those past residents as well. All right? How's that sound? Good. And then report only yes. I always recommend that we run this as report only yes first. That way we can see what Voyager is going to do, just in case there's anything that goes, maybe I put in the wrong contract rent or I put in the wrong utility allowance. I can catch that mistake before posting and creating these GR certifications. Okay. So once I click the submit button, Voyager is going to do two things. It's going to update my unit information, right? It's going to change my old contract rent, put in my new contract rent. My old basic rent's not going to change at all, right, because I just put in 0. My old utility allowance and my new utility allowance. So that's very important. If nothing is changing, you can just put zeros in those fields as well. And then my new market rents will be updated as well. That's what new MR stands for. If I scroll down, there's a resident section, right? And this is my information that's going to be being created for my new, or for my resident. So in my case here, I'm going to, these are some special claims residents that are no longer, are passed, so there's no action going to be taken for them. But for most of my residents, it's going to be creating new gross rent changes effective August 1st, 2015. Now, we notice that some of these residents, like Rhonda Jefferson, there's an open IR for them. And in this case, it's going to update my IR information with all my new contract rent information and my UA information. That way, I'm not having to go in manually and do that. So that's a very, very nice feature. Also, here's an updating an open IC, updating an open AR, right? If this is a past resident but not a 50059 resident, there is no action that's going to be taken, right? So any information or any questions about that, especially about how it's going to be updating any ARs or IRs or open certifications? Much like that unit transfer, remember when there was an AR or an IR that was effective the same date, if we have an AR or IR that's effective the same date, it will not create a gross rent change. However, it will mark that current certification as a GR in the background as well. So that's nice, and it'll also update that. So when creating these, we want to be very careful that we're updating, that we're making sure that all the updates are happening. What Voyager will do for us also is any open ARs in the future, in this case there's an October 1 AR that's already created, it will update that information for the contract rent and the utility allowance going forward, right? So validating our data is very important, and Voyager will do most of the heavy lifting with these gross rent changes. Okay? Questions about that? Once I've gone through this and approved it, made sure that everything is correct, I will go back to my monthly procedures, my gross rent change. As you'll notice again, much like those recertification notification filter screen, all my information is going to stick so that I can just switch my report only to no, click submit, and Voyager will create all of those new GR certifications for me, as well as update my unit history information as well. Okay. Questions about that? Any general questions about what we talked about about the certifications today? Anything at all? Any general questions at all?
Well, I know Althea was probably going to need to review it again, and we're going to talk to her over some of her questions. She just thought it was a little fast.
Yeah, we only had the 2 hours. Is there anything that, is she in the room? Maybe we can review something. We still have about 15 minutes.
No, she stepped into the restroom for a minute. She will be out shortly, but I'm going to get with her and talk to her about some of the things so that we're not taking up extra time.
Okay, so don't worry about the extra time. Otherwise, if nobody has any questions, we're just going to end the meeting, but we do have that extra 15 minutes if there's some more information or more detail that you would like to get into, or maybe if I went quickly over something, we can go over in more detail a little bit slower for her. I don't want to leave anybody behind.
Okay, we do have a previous recorded training session. This one was focusing on just the certifications, the income asset. We want to start, just to recap, start using the Yardi verification letters so that they're posted on the resident record. And also, we're going to start using that monthly compliance report to see what notifications you're sending out from Yardi. You should be using Yardi to print those recert letters.
Mm-hmm.
I saw
all recert letters get sent through Yardi, Liz. They get printed out of Yardi. The first, the second, and the third notice, they are printed through Yardi.
Okay, so let's rerun that compliance report and take a quick look at that. This is from live data copied over like last night. So
okay.
Because
I know we had not been using some of the recert letters, or I should say the verification letters. And, you know, the recert letters get sent to Yardi every month. The recert letters, absolutely.
But, so I'm looking here. Let's look at this and see what's been sent and what hasn't. So I'm looking down for pending certs overdue, and it doesn't have the first, second, and third notices for some of these folks with their
It might be a glitch then that is not posting the notices because they are printed on the first of the month or around the first of the month every single month. And they usually will print whatever is pending, first, second, and final. So we probably need to look into those why they were not posted. So they get sent, they get printed at the same time every month. It's
okay,
once a month.
Matthew, can you look at that and see why maybe for Rhonda Jefferson they're not posting to the system?
Yeah. So in that case, just to reiterate this, on our, and I'm going to go back to the recertification notices filter, we can run our letters, but running our letters will not input the date that we're actually sending on that report that we just saw. So if I just run the letters and click submit, it will not put a date on that report for me.
Once they have to click on post after they run the
have to come back and go to post. So that would be my suggestion there. In that case, I can try. We can kind of, something that I want to point out really quickly. Hold on. So let's use Rhonda as an example here. Is that, let me just get her information so that we can just focus in on her. So I'm just going to grab her resident ID. She has an AR effective, so her scheduled recert is for 5/1. So let's run this report retro.
It's legitimately late.
Yeah, so let's just go ahead and run this just for her. And let's say that this is 02/01/15 to 28/15. Just run it for all. And then letters. So let me make sure our report, and we'll just put 2, 3. Okay. So let's make sure that she shows up. She doesn't, of course. Let's try March. A date I know that she will show up. Oh, it looks like we've already created an annual recertification for her. Is that correct?
Yeah, I know she was late, and Carolyn was entering the final information that she had an IR, a retroactive IR that we were doing some income discrepancy and the AR. So it might be already in the system.
Yeah, so that would be my suggestion. That's the only reason I know that dates wouldn't show up there, because we were able to test it out today during the training and show that for all of the people that were there, that we were able to put in the date sent. The other thing that can cause that not to populate is for Rhonda Jefferson, is that notice date on the retroactive or on this past certification. Yeah, if this date is filled out here. Also, it looks like you did send it for her. She's just late. Yeah,
she's just late because she had an income discrepancy due to EIV. So we were resolving that, waiting for third-party verification.
Okay.
She was just legitimately late, but her information is in. Now, I do have a question about sometimes we had an issue with one tenant, and it kind of resolved itself, and I really don't know exactly what we did to resolve it, but for some reason it will not print once we were printing the notices that were due for the month. That particular person was not coming up on the stack of research notices.
Okay.
What will be something that could populate that, because that will cause something like that?
So on the recertification notices, one of the things is the due to sent date, just making sure that I see a lot of my clients they'll run that for the whole month.
No, but like she will be like the only one. Let's say she was a September research. When it was due to send the September notices, like the first notice, she will not come up. We just had a note somewhere, just to go ahead and print it manually. We'll have to go and print it in manually for her.
Was her previous certification signed and processed through tracks?
Yes. It happened a while ago, and it kind of resolved itself, but for the next research time, we were able to get it printed, but I know they did it a couple of times for a few tenants. And I was just wondering what would be something that could cause, a glitch like that.
Yeah, it would have to be a date being populated. That would be the only thing that I could think of. There's a population of a date somewhere.
Yes, but that's how we generate the recertification letters. We do the letters first, then they go back and they post. So I don't know why that particular one did not.
So just a question on Rhonda Jefferson. Clarify for me again. Why weren't the dates in there? We don't know.
We don't know. That's something we don't know. I mean, it's just something that we don't know. She was a May research. There were about like 40 recertifications in May. So why her date did not close when the letters were run at the same time? The letters don't get run individually. They get run by date, by certification date, due date.
Yeah, I'm asking.
So whoever is due for that month. So we don't know. That's what we're trying to find out. We don't know why.
I'm asking Matthew to tell us why, if he can tell us.
The reason that I can see right now why the certification dates are not coming up for Rhonda Jefferson are because, number one, let's see, this GR right here, so it's always going to look at the latest certification before the AR. Now those are there. Why are... I would need to take a look at... They should be looking at these dates right here. That's number one, but the dates look a little off to me because the recertification, the first one 120 days out, no. Yeah, the first one.
January 1st.
Yeah, it should be January 1st, but
for May, right? For May it was January 1st.
But for the second follow-up at 90,
it's February 1st, and the third will be March the 1st.
Well, it's actually the count. They actually HUD counts the days, not the months back. So sometimes that's why we see people recertifying on the second or the third, getting notices or recertification notices on the second or the third. So I would want to see. I would need to take a look kind of behind the scenes to see if these notice dates were populated correctly. That would be the only. That would be the only thing that I could think of that somehow something was updated incorrectly. And what I mean by that is possibly just that post date, how we would need to recreate it somehow, or ask the person who did it how they input those dates. But that's the only thing that I can think of. Let me pull this IR here really quickly. The other thing that seems a little bit strange for me is that there's no AR for 5-1.
It's not. That's what I said. She is late. We were taking care of an income discrepancy with EIB first. So the IR that's there, an IR is being entered now. We have to do a correction to the GR and enter the annual, the AR for May 1st. So that's what's being worked on now. It's in process. She is late, but it's because she had an
is for her to answer it, and also the third-party verifications were delayed.
Mm-hmm.
So we have 3 different activities going on: the IR, the correction to the GR because it happened before the IR, and the annual February 1st.
RGA. Sorry, I'm just noting this down. RGA, and that was Rhonda Jefferson.
Yes, 101.
So yeah, we could take a look at that and run some queries to see what the information kind of behind the scenes looks like. That would be, at this point, just kind of scanning over everything. That would be my next step in my troubleshooting.
Yeah, I think it's important that we find out why not, so we can get our practices in line with what Yardi's expecting, so those fields can be populated. Otherwise, the compliance won't work for us.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions?
Yes. This is Alfie at Parkview.
Hi.
Hi. I am kind of new to the 559 process. I just wanted to get a few more understanding on the gross rent, the IR, and the AR.
Okay.
I know that Ms. Linda has, been showing me some, some of the stuff that I needed to know, but it's a little bit confusing to me because I'm, coming in on section of property management. So if that can explain to me just a little bit more so I can understand when a resident come in and they wanting to do their recertification and, to explain to them about the gross rent change and the IR.
Okay. So with the gross rent changes, it's kind of, I know I'm kind of starting backwards here, but this is the easiest one to kind of knock out of the park. With the gross rent changes happen yearly or once a year, and they update much like on conventional properties, right? They update their market rents once a year. So sometimes that's why periodically people's rents get updated, right? Or you have to pay $5 more every year or so. So HUD does the same thing, but with contract rents, which is much like market rents and utility allowances because of inflation, so on and so forth. Those numbers will need to go up as well. So that's what the gross rent change is in effect doing. It's notifying us of those changes for the year. Now, gross rent changes very rarely affect the resident's portion of rent, right? So they'll only really affect just the HAP side of rent. So there might not be anything to report to the resident. And a lot of times they don't need to sign those gross rent changes. Now, that doesn't mean that all residents don't get assigned them. In certain cases, when the resident rent changes, they will need to sign it because we will need to notify them of a rent change. And I'm not sure what the particular state that you're in and what the requirements by law on notifying a resident are before a rent change, but I know that I think the standard is about 30 days for most states. Okay, so that's when gross rent change would need to be explained to a resident, is when their resident rent portion is changing. Okay, questions about that one?
No, that's good. Thanks.
Interim recertifications. An interim recertification can happen for multiple reasons, right? So pretty much the umbrella here that you're looking at is anytime a resident's income, family member dynamic is changing, they'll need an interim recertification. 50059 in HUD, they want to know about that, okay? So anytime any of their information is changing, they'll need an interim recertification. Now, sometimes the resident will come into the office and let us know, and sometimes they won't, right? If they don't let us know, that's when sometimes EIV findings come into effect, right? If you're using the EIV system, we'll find out that maybe they were making more money or they actually had another source of income that they misrepresented, they didn't tell us about, possibly. That would be another reason why we would need an interim recertification. Interim recertifications can happen either in the future, current day, or retroactively. So not to worry too much about retroactive changes, because Voyager will handle any rent and subsidy changes that need to be adjusted, right? So they'll go back to those prior months and then make those adjustments, do all the math for us. All we need to do is just tell Voyager about the information that's changing, right? So income that's changing, maybe there's a new household member, maybe they lost a household member. We'll need to update Voyager, and then Voyager will do all of the heavy lifting for us and do that calculation, the adjustments, and post those to the ledgers and to the voucher as well. Okay. Any other questions about the interim recertification?
Just one other question.
Yeah.
For the time for the interim recertification, if the resident does not come forward and tell you that their income changed, especially if they're earning more money, and they don't, how do we find that out? Is it just something that just comes on a monthly basis, or enlighten me some more about that? Because how do we know if the residents have changed jobs and they did not notify us?
Yeah, and that happens. That happens pretty often. And so the solution that HUD has come up with is that EIV system. Do you guys have a login through an EIV notification? Do you have access to that?
Since Althea is new, she has to get signed up on that, so she hasn't gotten to that stage yet. That's why she has that question.
Gotcha, gotcha. So that system is kind of run by the Social Security number. And right, when you get a new job, they require you to show your Social Security card, and they'll input that information. Well, that's what the EIV system is it's tracking that information by your name and your Social Security number. And so when you're getting a new source of income like that, let's say you change jobs or your income has gone up, they're going to know about it. So if they just, and that happens, right, they get a pay raise, they kind of forget to tell the manager, hey, my income changed, then that's our kind of our notification for us. Again, since we're not going to find out about that real time, it might be another month or two before we find out. We can always, again, put in that IR information retroactively, and Voyager can make those adjustments to the rent and HAP for those past months for us. Okay. Did that kind of cover it all for you, or is there still some holes in there?
Yes, that's good. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And then did you say that you had a question on the annual recertification?
I understand the annual based
okay.
on, you know, I'm good with annual.
How about corrections or terminations, initial certifications?
She hasn't gotten that far yet.
Gotcha.
So once she gets to actually doing one or two, then she'll become more familiar.
Gotcha. All right. What we do have, and what I can send to Liz after we're done here, is that we do have some training guides that will be really helpful for you. So if I can find them here, I can kind of just show you on my screen. Oops, those are the wrong ones. I was right the first time. We do have some training guides for HUD training guides here. There's 3 of them. There's one for the leasing steps workflow, and that's adding in a resident. That will take you step by step. There's also a post-rent and HAP, and then repayment agreements as well. So that can kind of fill in some of those holes as well, and I'll give those over to Liz as well. So do you have any questions about anything else? So that can really kind of fill in some of the gaps that are outside of the process here, but that leasing steps workflow will be really helpful to you as well.
Sounds good.
All right. Any other questions for me?
Not from me, no. Thank you.
Anybody else? Oh, anybody else? Liz, are you still with me?
Yeah, I think that's good.
All right. Let me hand the reins back over to you so you can stop the recording.
Okay.
And that's all I have. How did you think it went?
Good.